So I'm going to do a quick demo on this one. And I was saying in some previous videos that you can use your mesh more like clay and less like poly modeling software. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to basically be doing booleans and remeshing it and using the sculpting tools to help refine these things a little bit. But it's not going to be a fully in-depth demo, obviously. There's a lot of shapes that can give you problems, and it's not something that you always use. There's going to be times it fails, and you'll end up having to do a subdivision mesh possibly still. Certain pieces or parts of an object, and you might do this for other pieces and parts on your project anyway. So you can mix them up with other workflows, basically. But it's really kind of simple what we're doing here. So let me just start by creating a cube. We'll get this show on the road here. I just want to do kind of a simple one here to get started with, but basically you can bevel a cube, hit C, clamp it, AM, merge by distance. Take this, pull it here, make it smaller. You can add a cube in here, right in the middle. And we're still going to poly model, right? But this is kind of the cool part. We can Boolean these together. And I'm going to be using hard ops and bool tools for this, but hard ops for the brush Booleans. Use whatever software or add-ons you need or extensions. But basically, you can do some as non-destructive at first if you wanted to. This is kind of interesting because you can create shapes like this and take these and Boolean union it. So bool tools, Control-Shift-B, brush Boolean union, right? And you do this. And what's going to happen here is it's all one shape now, right? We can do a remesh right off the bat, just low resolution, and you can smooth it. Okay, and you smooth it however much you need to. You can see the shapes start to blend together. So if you want to type in a bigger value, go for it. You could do something like that. Now, you remesh it again, and you increase the resolution now. Okay, and you smooth it again. So you can create these shapes that kind of blend together rather quickly, right? Like this. By creating some shapes, joining them together, or Boolean unioning them, you get the idea, right? This is what we get. And the only problem with this, though, is you can't really like take that resolution down. So I'm increasing the voxel size. Because I'm a madman, I'm using the slider, but usually typing in values works better. Anyways, so this works out pretty well. The only problem is it gets really slow, and you can't exactly start doing Booleans on this anymore, especially non-destructive ones, right? It just gets a little bit too slow. Not turning out. There you go. Something like that. So what do? We can duplicate the base if we want. Shift D, duplicate it, right click again, convert it to a mesh, apply all that. We got to work destructively, right? That's the trick with this whole process. And this is still not high enough resolution for me. So what I'm going to do is go into sculpt mode, hit R, or we can actually sample first. Remesh, sample, boom. That'll get us to where we were mostly. Then we can hit R and hold Shift, drag it to the right, Control R, remesh. I'm going to take this up to close to 1,000,000. Is usually about where I would like to be at with these kinds of meshes. So we do that. We mesh filter here. We use smooth. And now we click and drag to the right. We get a really nice shape here. Good. Okay. So at some point, this piece here, you can keep it if you want. I'm going to delete it. Just extra polygons in the scene at this point. But if you want to keep it, do that. Or hide it, move it to a different collection. And we got this shape going. Now we can't do like box cutter. You want to set it destructive, and you want to set it to turn live preview off. All right. And you got to be a little bit careful if you use box cutter, but basically press E, go back and forth, make sure you get a good box cut. Boom. You can cut off an edge like this. Use it destructively. It'll do the Boolean. We get this. Okay. Now it's a lot easier, in my opinion, a lot of times just to go through and use a cube wherever you've created it. Bevel it again if needed. You want to use a lot of segment counts for these things. This might not even be enough. Okay. I'm going to merge by distance. So we've got doubles. We got to get rid of them. But a lot of times this isn't going to even be enough here. Okay. Box cut. We can, chop off edges or faces. See, sometimes it doesn't cut quite the way you want. So careful with that. Press E twice. Something like that going maybe. But we still want to have this more geometry in here, because if we join this to it and remesh it and try to smooth it, we're gonna have to smooth a lot. I don't want that. So you can mark edges with creases. Okay. In this case, Shift E, mark creases, subdivide it once or twice, boom, apply that. This is what you want to join to this one. Okay. So we can do that. We can mirror it first. We can convert to a mesh. When you're doing unions this way, you don't always have to do a Boolean union. You could just take two objects and join them together. Go into sculpt mode, hit R, remesh, Control R, remesh like that. Just make sure it's high enough resolution. Okay. You can actually max them out usually with the, well, it depends on the size of your objects if you're going to get good remeshes or not, but you can mesh filter smooth again. You want to get them blending together. These edges softening up a little bit, not too much. But basically, this is the idea of this workflow, is that we can do this all day long. It's not too bad. Like Blender can handle quite a bit of triangles in this scene. As you can see, we're pretty high here as far as triangle count goes. And this works though. And ultimately, that's what's cool about it, is that we can get in here, we can do all kinds of fun stuff. We can make all kinds of shapes and forms and do regular Boolean and Gon type workflows. But we're doing it on high density mesh and we're doing it destructively. That's the only difference here for this this setup anyway. So it's nothing super revolutionary. A lot of you guys have probably done similar things at some point working in Blender, but it's just that the trick is how you do it. Kind of matters a lot to get this to get more successful results anyways. And you can see we can do this all day, and we can Control Shift B, use auto Booleans difference, destructive Booleans, right? Turn box cutter off so we don't accidentally start cutting things up by accident. Good idea to always turn that off when you're not using it. And after a Boolean, it's a good idea to remesh it, but you don't always have to right away. You can do it later. You can always use cubes, create really cool primitive shapes that just give you all kinds of interesting shapes and everything else, basically. So you can have a lot of fun with this, more or less. And just go to town with it. You want to do like big smoothing, like the way we did the original shape. If we want to do a lot of smoothing again, we would just down res it, basically. So take it back down lower, Control R, remesh, be lower now. Mesh filter smooth will now work faster. So we can do that. We can take it back up in resolution, Control R, remesh again, and smooth it again. We'll get to this point here now. Okay. So little cool things like this start to add up. We can use subdivision meshes with this process as well. So nothing's going to stop you from creating the things you want to create, basically. I subdivide this. So loop cuts into it. This subdivided a lot, basically, so it's really smooth. We have to go to 6 on this one. Boolean subtracted destructively. And there you go. So we can do things like this as well, is what I was trying to point out there. We can do a lot of just really cool, interesting, fun things. Do another cylinder? Sure. This is where that turbo smooth modifier comes into play. Showed in another video how to make this little geonode setup that I called the turbo smooth modifier, because it's meant to mimic what happens in 3D Studio Max. Certainly does work. So smooth something like this, you can do that. Crank up the count a little bit. Apply it. Join it together if you want. Apply it and then Control J it. Remesh will remove interior if objects intersect, so there's nothing in here. You don't have to do a Boolean union necessarily. You can see how that worked out, right? Okay, so here's where the fun begins. This is really what it all comes down to right here, I think. We can do slices, okay? We can do those destructively as well. But basically, we go through the shape. We're going to do a bevel here. Remember, we got to use a heavy segment count, fortunately, but that makes the Booleans slower, but we're doing them destructively. It doesn't matter too much. So we're going to do Control Shift B with Bool Tools and slice. Destructive slice. Ready? There. 2 objects now. So basically, the triangle count can go up even if you keep it at the same resolution, because you've added all these extra areas for faces on the These can get very dense very fast. So do be warned that you need a pretty decent system to handle this. It's not going to go very well otherwise, generally speaking. But you can do this, and it's a lot of fun. Something that may make you want to upgrade your system. You're trying this and it doesn't work out for you. More specs there. As you can see, we just keep, doing what we have to do here. Some of these, you can change them if you want to. Nothing necessarily wrong with that. Shift things around and intersect them still. Join it back together maybe if you wanted to. Or just leave it like this. Ultimately, what you're doing is you're creating a high poly bake from, is what we're trying to achieve with this kind of workflow anyways. And so for the low poly, you have to retopo this for the low poly. That's all it comes down to. Water remesher will not handle these very well. So you're not going to get any kind of special quad remesh workflow tricks here because it just doesn't work that well for this type of stuff. Ultimately, yeah, we got something going. It's kind of cool. We could keep working on it, obviously. We could do, all kinds of different Booleans and radial arrays and arrays in general and just make this way more interesting, right? So every time you remesh, change the number. It doesn't matter if you go up or down just a little bit. You can hold shift while doing that. Just a little bit and then remesh. So otherwise you're going to get little like dots all over your surface. And it's not generally a good thing. Okay? If you get a little error, Control A, apply scale, go back, make sure everything should say something about non-uniform scale. Now that we've done all this, this is where you continue to work, basically. To do a cube, send it right here, cut off that little section there. Done. Turn it over. I could do the destructive Boolean still. This is where the resolution matters most. You have to have a high enough resolution to capture all your small edges. You keep mesh filters smoothing. As long as you're high density, usually it's going to affect these sharp edges the most. But you don't need to affect them much, just a little bit, because it's not even shaded smooth right now. You'll still have some of these like little holes that are showing up. Slide relax across these in the direction of the edge, right? A lot of times that works it out a little bit, but it softens the edge. Just keep that in mind. You can also just try scraping them off. Do a little chamfer or something. So you're able to sculpt on these guys. That's the cool thing. You can go through, you can continue working on it. Increase resolutions. You can smooth it. Careful with the increasing of the resolution though, because you might crash Blender. You'll get the hang of it after a few crashes. But you'll eventually get to the point where, like, you can see this is only 100,000 faces, and you'll start realizing you can crank a lot of these up. Well, Blender handles triangles pretty well in the scene, especially if you're using Vulkan as the backend. Under preferences system, you can use Vulkan. Not flawless though. It does, maybe doesn't work well for everybody. But it does increase the performance of the viewport, at least as far as I can tell. It handles this a lot better because of that. And but basically, if you want to sculpt on this, it's all destructive. Okay. You get in here, you start sculpting. Any change you make now with a mask or whatever you end up doing, right? Okay, we do this number here real quick. Actually, let's redo that. Shift S. Stabilize stroke. Let's turn pressure sensitive or strength off. Okay. Let's say we did something like this. Symmetrical, use symmetrical. Don't. Sometimes you got to increase contrast, maybe do it a couple times. You can always turn auto off and crank it up. Go back and smooth it a bit. Smooth. Change it. Plate. You don't have enough resolution, you can't do these things very well. And also, no matter what you do here, You smooth it more, it might come out a little bit nicer. Sometimes you have to manually retouch things. It's really a pain, but that's what happens with the voxels. Multi-res sculpts on subdivision mesh tend to look nicer, but only if you have proper topo and it's all laid out exactly how you need. These ones, they can look nice, but they're usually coming a little bit soft. So sometimes you got to go through and use like crease sharps, turn it to low strength, turn on the Shift S so you get stabilized stroke. And you'll have to go through and possibly work all of these a bit sharper and then do some smoothing on them as well. Probably get rid of that mask. So the smooth tool you can go through here. And as long as you don't go over the edges, which you should be able to smooth that down a little bit, flatten it. So you get into the part where you're sculpting on this, but it's very destructive. Like what we do here is permanent, right? Trick to this. Okay. You don't have to do it all permanently, but you want to get to a point where you remesh it at a very high resolution. And you know it's going to work for you. Like the shapes are all here. You just want to add some nice detail to it, little tiny detail. Scrape up some edges and things like that. Get these sculpt layers out on. Okay. You can create a layer. Might take a little second, but you can create a layer. And now whatever sculpting you do will be on this layer. And you have to save it. Don't. But we can do all kinds of fine detail sculpting now. And because it's using layers, it's almost as good as using a multi-res. Actually, it's better. The only downside of this is that we can't go back and remesh it. Okay. So what we have here is what we have to use. Otherwise, we lose our layer. Not that that's a huge issue. You can sculpt for a little bit, get things going the way you think they should be. And once it looks right, you can actually go ahead and remesh and then delete your layers because they won't work no more. Continue working with new layers. Okay. A little bit tricky, bit of a process too, right? But you can do this. Okay. And now we save that layer. Boom. So we can turn it on and off now. And we can do another layer and then go sculpt another detail somewhere, another series of details. Then keep adding this all up. Basically, we can do some really crazy work here that you probably didn't realize you could do in Blender. And this add-on is kind of that key to keep you from having to do it all destructively where you really screwed up a lot. So it gives you a chance to make mistakes and then go back and fix them as opposed to having it permanent, right? So a little bit semi-non-destructive now, at least for the sculpting part. So that's good. And then, you can do this whole thing in just the absolute craziest manner that you want. So you spend a minute on it for sure. But I would do all your Booleans first and try to add everything as much as you could with Booleans and maybe turbo smoothing it, subdivision mesh creases or whatever. And then come back at the very end and start doing it. So hopefully you don't have to read ever again and you'll be able to keep those layers perhaps. Now, I wouldn't fully rely off of this in the sense that like if you save your Blender file and come back to it, I'm not guaranteeing that, this loads back up correctly because I typically don't use it that way. But if you want to try that, you could. Usually I collapse it all down. Stays a voxel mess. Now, also, this is getting dense too. Like we're at 35 million triangles now in the scene. So these meshes, you can eventually just remove these. See, it stays now. It's permanent. You will want to decimate these. So decimation, a little tricky. Turn it off. Okay. And then type in a lower value. In our case, we're going to 0.5, but a lot of times you want to kind of creep in on the decimation. So you do like 0.5 maybe at first, followed by a 0.6 decimation or 0.8 or something. Or you could do another 0.5 and see how it goes. But you want to kind of creep them up with multiple decimations. It works better that way. So we do the decimate here, okay? And we get this going, right? We take it down further? Possibly. There's a little bit of stuff left in here. What we want to do is avoid where things start stretching out too much left to right. That will show up in normal maps if you're trying to bake it. But we could do another decimate, and we can turn it off. We can try like 0.8. We can even duplicate this while it's like this. Gonna apply the first one. Let's see what it looks like after it applies. These are starting to get a little bit stretchy now. I don't think I would want to go further than that. It's probably not even that far, but that's good enough. So we can delete. But if we needed them, we could keep applying them. Basically. Modifier list add-on has a checkbox if you're wondering. But ultimately, yeah, guys, that's it, man. This is how you do it. You can go back, sculpt all over it. This is exactly how all these were made. It's just more shapes and booleans taking place and a little bit of sculpting here. So this is all sculpted with masks, pushing the surfaces in and out. Really, it's really a cool workflow, guys. It's yes, it's system demanding, but I mean, really, if you just want to knock something out like this real quick, you can, and then you can go back and just retopo a low, bake it out. You got a problem. You know where I'm going with that? The low's not really that hard to retopo. It's doing like a high poly retopo where you're going to subdivide that retopo. A little bit more challenging, but a low poly retopo takes almost no time at all. A lot of times you can model like cylinders around this thing and still use Boolean, get it all into shape and work it out relatively easily in comparison to trying to do like a subdivision mesh version of this that's super optimized. But you could do that too if you want. Retopos that bridge from dirty, dense voxel meshes or photo geometry scans and things like that, getting them to a more usable polygon state. But for baked meshes, you don't have to do that necessarily. You start decimating everything, reduce that overall scene triangle count. So if you end up taking it to another software like Substance or Marmoset Toolbag, you're not pushing as much data around because these scenes at 30 million triangles and above, they get pretty heavy in file size, and your Blender file sizes go up too. So just want to keep that in mind as you're doing this kind of workflow. You don't always have to rely off of this. There's certain shapes where it just does not want to work out. Okay, like it's going to have a hard time working for you due to the way voxels work because it's on an SDF field basically, line distance field, like a little grid that it uses, and so things with a lot of diagonals and they can just get kind of messy sometimes. But for the most part, you'll find that a lot of shapes work, especially if it's dense enough. As long as you're using good base meshes that are dense enough as well, you don't really have a problem with this necessarily. There's variations on this workflow. Some guys like to do these low poly models that they can up-res, obviously using creases and subdivision. I've shown this kind of on the channel before. Or maybe even using regular standard mesh with bevels. You can increase or decrease the bevel counts, the non-destructive bevels at least, by angle, using weighted bevels. Some guys like to do that kind of workflow where they do all that first. So they end up more or less with a just dirty, unoptimized game model. And then they can crank the count up or crank it back down so they can get both meshes at the same time. They can have something that will remesh very well and also be usable game asset possibly. So, but this is where a lot of guys go wrong. When things are broken up in real life, you probably need to break it up in your high poly models as well. There's a good odd chance anyways you will. So a lot of guys want to try to create panel lines, right? And panel lines are a little bit tricky because a lot of guys want to kind of use the remesher, the voxel remesh, preserve all their panel lines. It doesn't really work that well for those super small details like that. Like text or font into the surfaces here doesn't really work out that well. Technically, you could use floaters for panel lines or fonts, but it's oftentimes better to just do it in Substance Painter if you're going to do the fonts, those kinds of details. At least in Blender, because Blender just doesn't hit those try counts that you probably want that you would hit in like ZBrush and what. So other than that, you break the model up, or you might use a floater for other specific details that you want, which is still a possibility. So ultimately, it's a really cool workflow. Takes no time at all to start creating models this way. It does take time to start understanding how to work this way, because we do lose the ability to use edge flows and bevels, and we have to start relying off the sculpting tools to create the shapes and forms we want. We have to understand, how to do all those initial shapes anyways, the booleans, and create the cool designs, fun stuff. So like, when do you use a subdivision or a boolean or a basic mesh? So you know if it's going to like if you use creases and you subdivide it, like, how do you know that's going to work, right? Well, you got to know how to subdivision model. Basically, the crease method is dirty subdivision. You want to look at it like that. Not meant to be a good sub-D model. It's just helps get you to do things like this, basically. And anyways, yeah, that's it for this video. I hope you guys go play around with this method if you've been modeling for a little while. Anyways, it's actually pretty cool, and they're pretty performant too. Like if you had a Boolean mesh with tons of Booleans on it, you can't just throw it around like this, move it around in the scene. But these ones you can, so you can actually, if you really wanted to play around with this and do like some concept art, you can make all kinds of pieces like this super fast. It doesn't take that long to do it, and then decimate them as best as you could. Just use these to like sketch over or draw. They don't even have to be this complex necessarily, but it's just kind of a cool thing you can do. And when creating a high to low poly bake, this is definitely valid for a lot of shapes that you're going to end up creating. So there's like weapons or things that you might work on where you're doing mostly this, and then only when you need to do manual subdivision do you use it, right? If you don't need it, don't use it. If it takes longer to do subdivision, you don't do it unless you have to, right? But if you want like super clean geometry and just to say that modeling for your portfolio, do some subdivision mesh, but in an actual kind of like work environment where you're trying to get things done and going and moving and all that. This is very valid for high to low poly bake. This one strategy of it though. Dozens of ways you can approach high to low poly bake. Anyways, with that out of the way, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I will check you out in the next one. All right, take care.